My name isn't important, but at the time I was 21 years old and living alone for the first time in my life. I had just moved into a small rental house in a quiet part of Indiana. It was the kind of neighborhood where people waved but didn't really talk. Nothing ever happened there. That was one of the reasons I chose it. That night started like any other normal night. I came home from work around 6 p.m., reheated leftovers, and sat on the couch watching TV. I remember feeling tired, but relaxed. There was nothing on my mind except what time I needed to wake up the next morning. The house was silent in a normal way. No music. No phone calls. Just me and the low sound of the television. I did a quick check of the house like I always did. Front door locked. Back door locked. Windows closed. It was routine. I wasn't scared of anything. I had been living there for a few months already, and nothing unusual had ever happened. Around 7 p.m., I noticed something small that didn't make sense. The hallway light was on. I was sure I had turned it off when I got home. I stood there for a few seconds trying to remember if I had flipped the switch without thinking. I told myself I probably did, and didn't think much of it. I turned the light off and went back to the living room. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed with a low battery warning. I got up to grab my charger from the bedroom. When I walked past the hallway again, the light was on. This time, I stopped walking. I stood there staring at it, feeling a strange tightness in my chest. The house was still quiet.
No sounds.
No movement. Just that light. I told myself there had to be a logical explanation. Old wiring. A faulty switch. Something normal. Still, I didn't turn it off right away. Instead, I listened. That's when I noticed something else. The air in the house felt different. Heavy. Like I wasn't alone anymore. I couldn't hear anyone, but I had the clear sense that someone else was there, standing just out of sight, waiting for me to notice. I remember thinking how strange it was that my heart was beating so fast over something so small. At that moment, I heard a soft sound coming from the back of the house. It wasn't loud. It wasn't sudden. It sounded like someone slowly breathing through their nose.
And it was not coming from me.
The house I was living in was a small, single-story rental on the edge of town. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a narrow hallway, and a living room that opened into a small kitchen. It wasn't new, but it was clean and cheap, which mattered to me at the time. Behind the house was a short backyard with a wooden fence separating it from the next property. In front, there was a quiet street with long driveways and dim streetlights that came on at sunset. It was a Tuesday night in early November. The weather had just turned cold, and the sky went dark by a little after 5 p.m. There was no rain or wind, just that still, empty feeling that comes with late fall evenings. Most of my neighbors were older couples or families who went to bed early. By night, the street felt almost abandoned. I had moved there after getting a job at a local warehouse. The hours were long and I didn't go out much during the week. That night, I had no plans. I wasn't expecting anyone. My phone had no missed calls. No messages. I was completely alone and I liked it that way. The only other person connected to that house was the landlord. I barely knew him. He lived in another town and only showed up when something needed fixing. He had stopped by earlier that week to repair a loose door handle on the back door. I remembered watching him test the lock a few times before leaving. At the time, it didn't seem important. Inside the house, everything felt normal. The lights worked. The heater made a low humming sound as it warmed the rooms. My shoes were by the door where I left them. My jacket was hanging on the chair in the living room. Nothing was out of place. I heated my food, ate at the kitchen counter, and rinsed my plate in the sink. After that, I sat back on the couch with the TV on low volume. The glow from the screen was the only light in the room. I wasn't paying attention to the show. I was just trying to relax after a long day. I had no reason to feel uneasy. There were no signs of trouble.
No noises. No warniness.
Just a quiet house on a quiet night, exactly the way it had been every other evening since I moved in. After I noticed the hallway light was on again, I tried to shake the feeling off. I told myself I was tired and overthinking it. I turned the light off and went back to the couch, but I didn't sit the same way as before. I stayed upright, phone in my hand, listening more than watching. The house had a lot of small noises. The heater clicked when it shut off. The refrigerator made a low hum from the kitchen. Normally, those sounds blended together and faded into the background. That night, each one stood out. Every noise made me pause and wait for the next one. A few minutes later, I heard something from the hallway. It wasn't a footstep. It sounded more like fabric brushing against a wall.
Slow.
Careful. I muted the TV and held my breath. The sound stopped as soon as I focused on it. The silence afterward felt worse. I stood up and checked the hallway again. The light was still off. Both bedroom doors were open, just like I had left them. The bathroom door was closed. I stared at it longer than I should have, expecting the handle to move.
It didn't.
As I turned to walk back, I noticed something small near the front door. My shoes were no longer lined up the way I left them. One of them was turned sideways. It didn't look kicked. It looked moved. My heart started beating faster, but I still tried to explain it away. Maybe I had bumped them earlier. Maybe I just didn't remember how I left them. I didn't want to believe anything else. I went back to the living room and sat down again. This time, I left the TV muted. That's when I heard it. A slow creak came from the ceiling above me. I lived in a single-story house. There was no second floor. The sound came from the attic space. It was followed by another creak, closer this time, like someone shifting their weight above the hallway. I stayed completely still. I could hear my own breathing, loud in my ears. I listened carefully, waiting to hear the sound again. After a few seconds, it came back, followed by a soft, dragging noise. It felt deliberate. I grabbed my phone and opened the camera, not sure why. I just needed something in my hand. I stood up slowly and walked toward the hallway again. Halfway there, I felt it clearly. I was being watched. I couldn't see anyone. I couldn't hear anyone breathing. But the feeling was strong enough that my skin prickled. I stopped moving and listened. Somewhere in the house, something shifted again, slower this time, as if whoever was there knew I was listening. I didn't move for a long time. I stood in the hallway with my phone in my hand, listening to the silence. The house felt different now. Smaller. Like the walls were closer together. Every room felt connected in a way it hadn't before, as if nothing was truly separate anymore. I tried to convince myself to leave. I thought about grabbing my keys and walking out the front door. But the idea of turning my back on the hallway stopped me. I felt safer where I was, even though that didn't make much sense. That's when I heard the attic access panel shift. It was a faint sound, but it was clear. Wood against wood. Something being pressed down from above. I slowly raised my eyes toward the ceiling. The small square panel above the hallway looked the same as it always had, but I knew something was happening behind it. A few seconds later, I heard breathing. It was steady and controlled, like someone trying to stay quiet. The sound drifted down through the thin ceiling. My mouth went dry. I realized then that whatever was in the attic wasn't an animal. It was a person. I took a step back and the floor creaked under my foot. The breathing stopped. For a moment, everything went completely still. Then the attic panel shifted again, this time more than before. Dust fell from the edges and landed on the floor in front of me. I backed away slowly, my phone shaking in my hand. I locked myself in the bathroom and turned off the light. I stood there in the dark, pressed against the wall, trying to stay quiet. I could hear movement above me now, slow and careful, as if someone was crawling. Then I heard a soft thump from the hallway. It sounded like feet hitting the floor. The bathroom door handle moved slightly, then stopped. I held my breath. My heart felt like it was going to break out of my chest. I could hear someone standing just outside the door, close enough that I could make out the sound of their breathing. They didn't try to force the door. They just stood there. After a few seconds, the footsteps moved away, heading toward the living room. I heard a drawer open. Then another. The sound of someone going through my things. That's when I knew I wasn't just being watched anymore. Someone was inside my house, fully aware that I was there, and they were getting closer. I couldn't stay in the bathroom any longer. Every second felt like it was stretching into a minute. The breathing outside the door, the faint rustle of drawers, the occasional creak of the floorboards. It was all too close. I knew if I didn't act, I'd be trapped. I grabbed the bathroom door handle and slowly pushed it open, barely moving, hoping the person hadn't noticed me. The hallway was empty, silent, except for the faint sound of something scraping across the wooden floor at the far end. My heart was hammering. I tiptoed back toward the living room, keeping as close to the walls as possible, my phone still in my hand with the flashlight on. Then I saw him. A figure standing near the couch, partially hidden in the shadows. I didn't get a clear look, just a dark shape that didn't belong. My stomach dropped. I froze for a second, and that was all it took. The figure turned slowly toward me. He was holding something in his hand, a long, thin object that glinted faintly in the dim light. I couldn't make out exactly what it was, but I didn't need to. That wasn't supposed to be there. Panic hit me. I ran. I ran past him without thinking, toward the front door. My shoes slapped against the floor as I sprinted, hearing him move behind me. I fumbled with the lock, twisting it frantically. It was stuck for a second, and my heart stopped. I could hear him right behind me now, slow, steady footsteps that didn't rush, but didn't hesitate either. The door clicked open. I pushed it with all my strength, slipped outside, and ran down the driveway. The street was empty, cold, and quiet, but it didn't matter. I didn't stop. I ran toward the neighbor's house, pounding on their door until someone came out. I tried to explain through shaking words that someone was in my house. The neighbor called 911 immediately. I stayed outside, shivering, staring at the house. The dispatcher told me to stay put. Within a few minutes, police arrived with flashlights, guns drawn. They moved inside slowly, checking every corner. I watched from the driveway, too scared to go back in. Finally, one of the officers came out and told me he had found the man hiding in the attic crawl space. The officer described him as calm, silent, and fully prepared to wait there for hours. He had gloves and a small crowbar, and he never made a sound until I nearly discovered him. I collapsed on the curb, shaking. My house, my safe place, had been invaded by a complete stranger. The thought that he had been up there, watching and waiting, made me feel sick to my stomach. Even after the police took him away, I couldn't stop looking at the house. Every shadow on the walls, every sound outside, felt like him. I knew that for a long time, I wouldn't feel safe there, or anywhere. After the police left, I thought the worst was over. The man had been caught, my house had been cleared, and I was physically safe. But the next morning, the landlord showed up to inspect the damage. I thought he was just there to check the doors and windows, but what he said stopped me cold. He told me that the man they caught wasn't just some random burglar. He had been living in the attic crawl space for weeks. The landlord had done a quick inspection before I moved in and didn't notice anything, but apparently, this man had found a way to hide there without anyone knowing. He had been inside my house while I was at work, sneaking around, eating my food, and watching my routine. I couldn't believe it. Weeks. Weeks of someone living inside my home, and I had no idea. Every sound I had dismissed as the heater or the house settling, every creak and groan, could have been him moving around quietly above me. The thought made my stomach churn. Then the landlord added something worse. He said the man had no criminal record for violent crimes, nothing that would suggest he was dangerous, but he had a history of stalking. He targeted houses where people lived alone. He was deliberate, patient, and calculated. He didn't just break in, he waited. He learned the patterns of his victims before they even realized something was wrong. I remembered the first night I noticed the hallway light flicking on. The small sounds I had dismissed. The feeling that I was being watched. It wasn't random. It had been him, observing me, testing my reactions, deciding when to make his move. The most terrifying part, he could have stayed there much longer. There were nights when I wasn't home. He had unlimited time to figure out everything about the house. My life, my routines, my habits. He had been learning them all without me knowing. I replayed every detail in my head. The way he had been completely silent until the exact moment I noticed the strange noises. The way he had moved through the house like he had rehearsed it 1,000 times. Everything suddenly made sense. And I realized something even more disturbing. I would never know how long he had been inside before I noticed him. I would never know how close I had come to being truly trapped. That's when it hit me. Catching him that night wasn't luck. It was a relief, yes, but it was also a warning. He had planned it all carefully, and there was no telling if he would have returned when the house was empty again. I stared at the attic panel and shivered. For weeks, someone had been living above my head, and I had no clue. Even after the police took him away, I couldn't shake the feeling that the danger wasn't completely gone. They assured me he was in custody, but I couldn't stop thinking about the weeks he had already spent inside my house without me knowing. The thought of someone living so close, watching my every move, had a weight that didn't go away.
I tried to get back to normal life.
I changed the locks, installed extra security cameras, and even put up motion sensors in the attic and basement. But nothing made the house feel safe again. Every small sound, creaking floors, the wind tapping the windows, even my own footsteps, made me jump. Every shadow seemed like it could hide someone. Sometimes, when I'm home alone, I check the attic panel even though I know it's locked and empty. I can't help it. I can't convince myself that just because he's gone, he couldn't return. The thought that he might come back, or that someone else could find a similar hiding place, haunts me. I've thought about moving, but even that doesn't feel like a real solution. The idea that someone could choose any house, any quiet street, and do the same thing, it's unsettling. The world suddenly feels much bigger and much more dangerous. At night, I still catch myself listening for footsteps. I still glance at shadows and corners with suspicion. Sometimes I swear I hear faint noises in the ceiling, like the soft scraping of something moving. I tell myself it's the house settling, or the wind, or my imagination. But deep down, I know it could be him or someone else, watching, waiting, learning. The police never explained how he had managed to live there so long without being noticed, and I never asked. I don't think I wanted the full answer. Some things are better left unknown. I still don't know exactly who he was, why he chose my house, or what he would have done if I hadn't come home that night. And sometimes late at night, when the house is silent except for my own breathing, I feel like I can hear someone else. Quiet, deliberate, waiting. I look at the attic panel and the locked doors and wonder, was it ever really empty? Or is it just a matter of time before it happens again? The case was technically solved, but the unease lingers. And I can't shake the feeling that somewhere out there, he's thinking about the next house. Maybe even mine.